All right, so the next topic that we're going to cover is long division of polynomials. So what we're going to do is we're going to divide the following polynomials using long division. So I am going to remind you guys how to do long division just in case you forgot. So the first thing, I'm going to make up a problem, okay? So let's do 2 divided by 361. Okay, and so we're going to go ahead and divide this 2. And so the first part that you do is you take 2 and you divide it into 3. So 2 only divides into 3 one time. Okay, then we take 1 times 2 gives you 2. And then your next step is to subtract. Okay, so 3 minus 2 gives us 1. And then we go ahead and drop the 6. So now we're going to do 2 divided by 16. That gives you 8. So then we multiply 8 times 2 is 16. We subtract, and that gives you 0. So then we go ahead and drop the last number, which is a 1. And 2 divided by 1, it does not go in. So we're going to go ahead and fill that in with a 0. It goes in 0 times. So 0 times 2 is 0. And when we subtract, we have a remainder of 1. So the way that one of the ways you can write the remainder is as 1, your remainder, divided by 2, whatever you divide it by. So it'll be 180 and 1/2. Okay, so let me go ahead and erase this. We are going to follow the exact same steps when we are dividing polynomials. So if we do 2x squared plus 10x plus 12, we're going to go ahead and take that and put it inside the little box. Whoops, make it a little lower. So 2x squared plus 10x plus 12. Okay, so that one goes inside the little house. And then on the outside goes the x plus 3. Okay, so we follow the same steps. Now it is, of course, going to be a little bit different because we have polynomials. So the way that you do this is you look at x, and here you have 2x squared. Okay, so you look to see x times what is going to give you 2x squared. So x times 2 would give us 2x. So then x times x would give us the x squared. Okay, so then we take the 2x and multiply it times the x. That gives us 2x squared. We take the 2x and multiply it times the 3. That gives us plus 6x. Okay, then your next step is to go ahead and subtract. Okay, so not only do we have to subtract the 2x squared, but we also have to subtract the 6x. So instead of this being a plus, it needs to be a minus. Okay, so you change it over to a minus. So that is the most trickiest part of all of this, is if you forget to put the minus. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and subtract. 2x squared minus 2x squared cancels out. 10x minus 6x gives us 4x. And just like we did on the other problem, we drop the next one. So the next one is 12, and then we start all over again. So here we have an x, and we need to get a 4x. So x times what gives you 4x? Well, x times 4, a positive 4, gives you 4x. So once you write that 4 there, you go ahead and take the 4 and multiply it. 4 times x is 4x. 4 times 3 is a positive 12. And then we go in and subtract. So here, 4x, we subtract this 4x, but not only do we subtract the 4x, we also have to subtract the 12. So instead of this being a plus, this is going to turn into a minus. So 4x minus 4x cancels. 12 minus 12 also cancels. That means that you have no remainder. Okay, so then this would be your answer. So 2x squared plus 10x plus 12 divided by x plus 3 is equal to 2x plus 4. Okay, now let's look at the next one. Okay, so here we have 4x to the third power minus 7x squared minus 11x plus 5, and we're going to divide it by 4x plus 5. Okay, so we're going to take the 4x plus 5. That's going to go on the outside. Divided by, and then we're going to put what's in the inside. So we have 4x to the third power minus 7x squared minus 11x plus 5. and then we start dividing. So we have a 4x, and we need to get a 4x to the third power. So 4 times 1 is going to give you 4, and then we do x to the third power divided by x, okay? That gives you x squared, okay? Then we go ahead and multiply. So once you figure out what that is, we multiply 1x squared times the 4x. That gives us 4x cubed. Then we take the 1x squared and multiply it times this 5, and that gives us 5x squared. Okay, then we go ahead and subtract both terms. So not only do we subtract the 4x squared, we also have to subtract the 5x squared. And since it's positive, we're going to change that into a negative. Okay, so then 4x cubed minus 4x cubed cancels out. We take negative 7x squared and subtract 5x squared, and that gives us negative 12x squared. And then we drop down the next term, minus 11x. Okay, once you drop, you start all over. So we have a 4x, and we need a negative 12x squared. So 4 times negative 3 will give us negative 12. And then x times x will give us this x squared that we need. Okay, then once we do that, we're going to go ahead and multiply negative 3x times 4x is negative 12x squared. Negative 3x times positive 5 is going to be a negative 15x. Okay, once we do that, we can go ahead and start subtracting. Okay, so because this is negative and you subtract a negative, that turns into a positive. Okay, the same thing with the negative 15. When we subtract this negative 15, that turns into a positive 15. Okay, so pretty much when you go and subtract, you go and switch out those signs. So negative 12x squared plus 12x squared cancels. Negative 11x plus 15x gives you 4x. And then once you get that, you go ahead and drop down the last term. So it is plus 5. And then we start all over again. We have 4x, and we need a 4x. So 4x times what would give you 4x? Well, 4x times a positive 1 will give you 4x. So then you go ahead and multiply 1 times 4x is 4x. 1 times 5 gives you a positive 5. And then we go ahead and subtract. So minus 4x, and then you also have to subtract the 5. So instead of this being a plus, it turns into a minus. I'm going to go ahead and put it there, minus 5. Now when we go ahead and subtract, both of these cancel each other out, and it gives us 0. Okay, so here we have 1x squared minus 3x plus 1. So then when I write down my answer here, I'm just going to go ahead and write it as x squared. Remember, you don't have to write the 1 in the front because it becomes invisible, minus 3x plus 1. All right, let's go ahead and move to the next problem. So here we have 8x to the third power, 6x squared plus 14x plus 8, and we're going to divide it by x minus 8. So on the outside, we are going to put x minus 8 divided by 8x to the third power minus 66x squared plus 14x plus 8. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and start the same way. So we have an x, and we need an 8x to the third power. So that means that this is going to give us 8, and then x times what gives you x to the third power? Well, x times x squared. And then we go ahead and multiply. So x squared times x gives us 8x to the third power. And then we also multiply the 8x squared times a negative 8, which would give us negative 64x squared. Go ahead and erase that. Okay, so then we're going to go ahead, and our next step is to subtract. So we subtract the 8x, and when we subtract the 64, it ends up turning into a positive 64. So this cancels out. Negative 66 plus 64 gives us negative 2x squared, and then we drop the next term, which would be plus 14x. All right, and then we go ahead and start all over again. We have an x, and we need a negative 2x squared. So that is going to give us negative 2. And then x times x is going to give us that x squared that we need here. So then when we go ahead and multiply the negative 2x times the x, that gives us negative 2x squared. We multiply the negative 2x times the negative 8, that gives us a positive 16x. Let me erase this so it doesn't get super messy. And then we're going to go ahead and subtract. So this negative 2x squared ends up turning to a positive 2x squared. This plus 16x is going to end up turning into a minus 16x. So 2x squared, negative 2x squared plus 2x squared cancels. 14 minus 16 gives us negative 2x. And then our last step is to drop the 8. So it's a plus 8. And then we start all over again. So here we have an x and we need a negative 2x. So what we're missing is the negative 2. Okay, negative 2 times x gives you negative 2x. Negative 2 times negative 8 is a positive 16. And then we're ready to subtract. So when I subtract this negative 2x, it turns into a positive. And when I subtract the positive 16, it turns into a negative 16. Okay. So then this part cancels, and 8 minus 16 gives us negative 8. So this time, unlike the other problems, this time we're left over with the remainder. So just like I did in the example in the beginning, you're going to write it as minus because it's negative. You're going to do 8 over what we divided by. We divided by x minus 8. Okay. My answer is not going to fit on here if I try to write it. So I'm just going to go ahead and highlight this. This would be our final answer. Okay, and the last example. So here we have x to the 5th power plus 8x to the 4th power plus 2x squared plus 19x plus 16. So if you guys notice by looking at this that we're missing a term right here in the middle. And that term that's missing is an x to the 3rd power. There's no x to the 3rd power. So when we're dividing and we write this down, why don't you write it over? X plus 8 goes on the outside, and then in here goes x to the 5th plus 8x to the 4th power. And because we don't have an x to the 3rd power, we're going to have to write it in as 0x to the 3rd power because we don't have any. And you'll see right now why we need that space in there, okay? So plus 2x squared plus 19x plus 16. So if you notice that you're missing a term, you need to fill it in with a 0, okay? And then we do the exact same steps that we were doing. So we're starting off with the first one. We have x and we need an x to the 5th power. So that means that we're missing 4 more x's. So an x to the 4th. Then you multiply x to the 4th times x is x to the 5th. X to the 4th times 8 is 8x to the 4th power. And then we go ahead and subtract. So then this plus ends up turning into a minus. Okay. Oh, I need to erase that. So when we subtract x to the 5th minus x to the 5th cancels. 8x to the 4th minus 8x to the 4th also cancels. So we're left with 0. Okay, if we were to drop down to the next one, it would be 0x to the 3rd power. So we really don't need this one. We're going to have to drop down the next one, plus 2x squared. So this one happened to not affect us, and then drop down to the 19x. Just because there's none that are there. But when we're adding, if you don't fill it in, then they're not going to match up like terms. So that's why you want to fill it in. But in this case, or for this problem, it did not affect us at all. So I'll just go ahead and leave it like that. And now we're working with a positive 2x squared plus 19x. And then we start all over. We have x and we need a 2x squared. So we go ahead and see what we need. We're going to need the 2. And we're going to need an x because we only have one x here. So then 2x times x is 2x squared. 2x times 8 gives us 16x. And then we go ahead and subtract. So minus, minus. This cancels out. 19 minus 16 gives us 3x. Then our next step is to drop the 16. And then we start all over again. So here we have an x and we need a 3x. So in order for us to get a 3x, we're going to have to multiply times 3. So plus 3. 3 times x is 3x. 3 times 8 is 24, and it's a positive 24. And then we go ahead and subtract. So that positive 24 ends up turning into a negative 24. So these cancel out. 16 minus 24 gives us -8. And then we're going to go ahead and write that as a remainder. So minus, and then it'll be 8 over x plus 8. Okay, remember you write whatever number you have left over here, you write it over this number here. And that's it. If you guys have any questions, let me know. Thank you guys. Bye.